today we are going to cover sukh or happiness. And we have four verses lined up for us: 36, 37, 38, and 39. And I will start with verse number 36. I will chant. Sukham tvevadanim trividham shrinu me bhartarshobha abhyasadramate yatra dukhantam cha nigachati. So the verse translates to, and now hear from me, O Bhartarshabha, name for Arjun, the threefold division of happiness, sukh, where one by practice rejoices and ends sorrow. So let's take this up word by word. Sukham is happiness, tu indeed, idanim now, trividham threefold, shrinu is here, me from me, Bhartarshava is a name for Arjun, abhyasat. Abhyas is practice, abhyasat becomes from practice. Ramati is revel or rejoice in. Yatra where dukhantam is, dukh is sorrow, ant is end, so dukhantam becomes end of sorrow. Cha and nigachati goes. So the verse translates to, and now hear indeed from me, O Bhartarshabha, the threefold division of happiness, sukham, where one by practice rejoices and ends sorrow. So let's chant it together. Sukham trividvadanim trividam shrinu me bhartarshabha abhyasadramate yatra dukhantam cha nigachati. So just continuing with the flow of, see, in the previous set of 9 verses, we talked about Gyan, Karma, and Karta. So we talked about knowledge, action, and actor. So all these follow the threefold divisions of, into Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. So far, how the chapter has flown, the logical flow has been that from verses 1 to 6, we talked about sannyas or renunciation and tyag, relinquishment. So the difference between the two, and then we proceeded in the next 6 verses. So verses 7 to 12, we talked about tyag and its categorization under Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. Right. So after that, and why did we talk in detail about tyag? Does anyone remember why we talked in detail about tyag and not sannyas? Uh, Anyone would like to explain? Take it up? No? So we talked about tyag because sannyas is an effect. Tyag is the cause. So once we start relinquishing, sannyas will follow. It's like, in the sun, the shadow will follow us. So if we are tyagi, we will become sannyasis, right? So that's why we talked in detail about tyag. Okay, then, so this was verses 7 to 12 of this chapter. Verses 13 to 18 talked about the causes, incentives, and constituents of action. And we talked about the 5 necessary components of any action, which was the adhishthanam or the seat, the body, karta, the doer, karanam, prathigvidham, or the different type of instruments or organs of perception. Then vividha prathak cheshta or various distinct functions, organs of action, and the devam, the enabler, the Lord, the spirit within each one of us. So that was verse number 13 to 18. Then from verses 19 to 28, we talked about the threefold division of Gyan, knowledge, karm, action, and karta, the actor. So these three factors constitute the all the impulse of all the actions. After that, in the last set of 39, sorry, 29 to 35, we talked about buddhi and or the intellect, and dhriti, the steadfastness, or the force or the motive between all our actions, behind all our actions. And not only the motive for the activity, but how to intelligently control and direct it towards the goal that we have set for ourselves. So every actor acts in one's field, guided by one's knowledge, rules by or by our understanding, and the action is controlled and maintained through our dhriti or fortitude or steadfastness. So if we look at it, we have covered, we have dissected and analyzed work or action completely. So we have understood the anatomy and the physiology of work. Now we are moving to the psychology of work. Why do we act? So, to what purpose? All of us are working from morning till night, way past our normal working hours. All the creatures are going helter skelter, doing some activity. So, why do we act? To what purpose does every living creature from the womb to the tomb act in this world? So, why do we act?
Survival. Initially, it's survival, and then we become happiness.
Even in the survival mode, actually, what are we looking for? More satisfaction. So when you talk of survival, that means you want to be better in the world, right? Because
So,
you think
as a
that,
child, when we are doing anything, it is, crying to get milk and
yeah, so you're asking for something new. So that is the activity. So you think that you will get milk and you will feel satisfied, right? Even as a child or even as a poor person, you
yeah,
strive for more wealth
yeah.
because you think that an extra job will help you, will give you more satisfaction, right?
Hmm.
So the purpose is that we are all seeking greater joy, more satisfaction, and looking for happiness, which we think we will get from uh, a particular activity or a particular accomplishment. So if I come first in the class, I'll feel happier than the person who came second in the class. So I work towards beating the person who came second. Now, all everyone's goal is the same. If we look at it, you know, very objectively, we will find that everyone is working for the same thing, for gaining happiness, for elevating experiences, for bettering a sense of fulfillment, right? So, in and through the variety of actions in the universe, and now I come to human beings, the good, the bad, the ugly, the passionate, the intelligent, the dull, we are all seeking our own sense of satisfaction. Now, what is interesting is that the goal being the same, that means we are seeking happiness. Why are the paths adopted by us different?
Because
That
of our gunas.
are gunas, and they are three gunas, and we are all composed of different percentage of these gunas. So consequently, all the constituents of ours are also different, right? So there is a difference in the way we are constituted in the material layer of ours, and they constitute our actions. So each one of us has a different texture of these constituents, and consequently, our buddhi and dhriti is also different. Therefore, the path adopted by each one of us is different from all others. So now, because the components, the five components, when we talked about that the body and organs of action, perception, of course, they were the enabler being the same. All those components that we had talked about were of three different types. Therefore, it follow and the paths we are adopting are different. Therefore, it implies, it's logical that the sukh or what we gain, sukh is again the effect. So that is also of three different textures, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. That is what is being said here in this verse. And through practice or abhyas, abhyas meaning we have to understand this complete scheme of things. The Gyan, Karta, and Karm, Buddhi, Dhriti, all that we have been covering so far. And we have to firstly read about it, then train ourselves, educate ourselves, and exercise self restraint that will lead to our evolution. So, at all points of time, if we are aware to a large extent, we can diagnose ourselves and understand why we are sorrowful or why the sorrow is there. Because, see, the verse is saying that it will remove, uh, it'll give you happiness and end sorrow. So, once we are aware of why we are sad, we will work towards removing that aberration in our lives, right? So, we can self educate ourselves or self calibrate or and again recalibrate and readjust and reevaluate our lives and gradually move to that state where we end our sorrows totally, or at the very least reduce them to whatever extent we are putting that practice forward. So essentially we must be constantly be alert of what we are thinking, what where is our mind taking us, right? And of course Arjun is being referred to as Bhartarshvabha in this verse, which is the best specimen or the bull amongst the Bharat race, or the best specimen. Bull is an example of great sacrifice and a lot of work, right? So this is where we are. So essentially, we are going to now talk about the threefold happiness over the next three verses. Moving on to verse number 37. I will chant. यतदग्रे विषमेवाः परिणामेऽमृतोपमम् तत्सुखं सात्विकं प्रोक्तम् आत्मबुद्धिप्रसादजम्. So the verse translates to, the next two verses are very nice and we have been actually discussing them even in the earlier chapters. This verse translates to, that which is like poison in the beginning, but in the end like nectar, that happiness is called sattvic, a blessing born from clarity of one's intellect, buddhi. Let's take this up word by word. Yat, that which, tat, that, agre, in the beginning, initial stages, visham, poison, if like parinami, parinam is in the end, the result. So pariname becomes in the end, amrit upamamam, or like upma is to an amrit. So amrit upamam becomes like nectar, tat that, sukham is happiness, satvikam the guna satvik, proktam is declared, atma buddhi prasadajam. So Atma is our own, Buddhi, Atma Buddhi becomes from the clarity of one's intellect. And when we add prasad to it, so the word becomes Atma Buddhi Prasadajam, or blessing born from clarity of one's intellect. So our discrimination is perfect. So that which is like poison in the beginning, but in the end like nectar, that happiness is called sattvic, a blessing born from clarity of one's intellect. Let's chant it together. यतदग्रे विषमेवा परिणामेऽमृतोपमम् तत्सुखं सात्विकं प्रोक्तम् आत्मबुद्धिप्रसादजम्. So we have established and we have agreed, and we can take up any disagreements in the question answer session. We are all seeking happiness. The paths we have also understood that the paths we choose differ because of our constituent differences in our constituent components. Now, see this the paths that we are talking about. This the Kathopanishad, and very often I've been saying that certain aspect actually many schools of thought believe that Bhagwad Gita is a detailed explanation of the Kathopanishad. So, in the Kathopanishad, we talked about it talks about these paths as the Shreya path or the path which is correct. This path is unpleasant in the beginning but blissful later. And we have been discussing this, I think, from chapter 3 onwards, or maybe, yeah, chapter 3 onwards, definitely. And the Priya path, which is the pleasant path, that path which is pleasant in the beginning but fraught with sorrow later on. So, actually, this is what we are covering over these next set of verses. So, these two paths are what we are going to discuss. So the Shreya path is what? It's the path when we realize that the happiness that we are seeking is not in the world which appears in front of us. It is within us. So it is our inner self-control, our inner self-perfection, or self-improvement that provides us with the gratification, with that bliss, that sublime bliss that we are seeking. Now, this path of inward journey or towards our core is extremely arduous and painful in the beginning. A lot of discipline and self control is required. But once the direction is corrected, firstly, so you go in the correct direction, you reverse, instead of going out into the world, you move towards your core. And we inculcate discipline and control. We find that we have stopped bothering about a lot of things which don't which are irrelevant now, so we are not bothered about them. We do our work, we act in the world, that's all right, but our faculties, our mind and intellect is freed up of these worldly desires, and then we can wholeheartedly engage ourselves in the pursuit of the self. So all our actions, we are able to dedicate to that Paramatman. And we continue to work well in the world to the best of our capabilities. And it is then that we experience that subtlest, purest, and complete bliss. And in fact, forget spirituality. Even if we look at what we want to achieve in the worldly context, a lot of direction, self control, and discipline is required to achieve anything in the world. Even education, so we talked about that coming first in the class, or let's say pursuing a degree in computer science from one of the premier institutes of the world. We have to put in a lot of discipline and effort and steadfastness towards our goal. Now, while the journey is going on, so when I have said that I want to, let's say, graduate in computer science from MIT, and I set this goal in class 10 or class 11 or class 12, wherever, I start working towards that goal. Now, so initially what happens when other people are out partying or, having a ball of a time, I, as a student, I sit down and focus on my work, on my studies, my education. All my faculties are there and I happily do it, but the process is involves a lot of discipline and a lot of letting go of these immediate pleasures. So as I move further and further on my path, I may be missing out on a lot of fun that my peers are immediately having. But maybe 4 years down the line or 5 years down the line, I will be where my peers may not be there. Okay. So at that point of time, we feel happy. The person who's put in that effort, that we put the right effort and discipline at the right time. Okay. So this is true. I took the example of education. This is true for a job. It's true for hobby. I mean, even when you're learning music or learning art, anything that we take up, a lot of discipline is required. And in fact, you'll find that we give up a lot of hobbies when we reach that critical path where a lot of discipline, see, initially when we take up a hobby, it's a lot of new things that we learn and so on and so forth. But the moment the practice and discipline comes in, we tend to part ways because we cannot put in that effort. But if we do, we will become masters in whatever hobby we have chosen in our jobs. So, all happiness actually, not only spiritual happiness, but all range of happiness arises out of self control and self discipline. This happiness is sattvic or the noblest, subtlest happiness. Of course, here we are talking with respect to the absolute happiness. So, we are talking of the Paramatman, but the same thing applies in all fields. Now, the result, why this happiness arises is because we have complete clarity of intellect, discrimination. So, when I am choosing an activity, whether it's a worldly activity or in the relative zone or a spiritual activity, I know what I need to do. The sattvic sukh arises from alignment with the Paramatman. I know the goal is that, and the rest of the activities fall in place according to that. So, when the goal is the Brahman or the Paramatman, the steady self effort, unswerving in yoga, that's dhriti that we just recapped, everything works with alignment to the uh, Paramatman, and that is the sattvic sukh. Let's move on to verse number 38. So, the sattvic happiness is poisonous in the beginning, is very difficult. Poisonous means which is very difficult in the beginning, but is nectarine later on. Let's move on to the Rajasic happiness, verse number 38. विषयेन्द्रियसंयोगात् यतदग्रेऽमृतोपमम् परिणामे विषमेव तत् सुखं राजसंस्मृतम्. So the verse translates to the happiness arising from the contact of sense organ with object, which in the beginning is like nectar, but in the end poison, that is called Rajasic, word by word. Vishayendriya is Vishay is subject, Indriya is our sense of organs. Now, Sayogat from contact. So, Vishay Indriya Sayogat becomes from contact of sense organ with the object or the subject, I mean, whatever, where we are focused. Yat, that which, tat, that, agre in the beginning, Amrit Upamama is like nectar, like Amrit. Parinami, in the end, Visham, poison. If like tat, that, Sukham, happiness, Rajasam, Rajasic, Smritam is thought. Right? So, just the opposite of the sattvic happiness. If you look at the context of the nectarine and the poison, beginning and the end, It's just the opposite of what we read in verse number 37. So the verse number 38 translates to the happiness arising from the contact of sense organs with object, which in the beginning is like nectar, but in the end like poison, that is called rajasic. So let's chant together. विषयेन्द्रियसंयोगात् यतदग्रेयामृतोपमम् परिणामे वेशमेवाः तत् सुखं राजसंस्मृतम्. So this is the Priya path. You remember we talked about the Shreya and the Priya path in Kat Upanishad. Of course, the Upanishads don't really talk at the tamasic level, so the next verse will be like at a we will discuss separately. But this is the Priya path of the Kat Upanishad, which is pleasant in the beginning, but is fraught with sorrow later on. This is the path of instant sense gratification. Okay, so you want to have a sweet, there's a mango in front of you, you cut it, eat it, instantly your senses are sense, or yeah, whatever, taste buds, eye, smell, whatever, or everything is gratified and you are happy. You've got that gratification, right? So, Rajasic, this is Rajasic happiness. A Rajasic happiness is a thrill that arises from the contact between the senses and the worldly object. So, my tongue tasted the mango, it felt good, my nose smelled it, I felt better, and so on and so forth. It is wonderful in the beginning because our senses are instantly gratified. But if you keep on eating the mango, the doctor will tell you that, okay, the sugar levels have gone high, you need to control, cut it down. So, what is happening? What was initially nectarine, the continued contact with that sense object ends in sorrow, poison, pain, right? So, the contact of what are we discussing? We are talking of the contact of the senses with the object. Now, both the contact and the object have a beginning and an end. So, the experience itself is fleeting. It has a beginning, it starts and it ends. So, that mango, I started eating it, experience started, the mango finished, experience ended. Mango finished, contact, the experience ended. This you may remember, I think, in when we had talked about action, about karma, chapters 3, 4, and 5, the term used was adyantavat. So it has a beginning and an end. Interestingly, not only the object, even we ourselves change, nothing remains the same. So, no object, no individual, no experience remains constant. Everything changes. It's a changing world. Change is the only constant in our world, as we keep saying. So, now the change in the object or in our own selves. So, maybe, when I can't see something or I can't smell something, even that mango, if my sense of smell is going, that aspect of the pleasure is taken out. I will not be able to smell it. So, any change in the object or our cells will affect the contact. So, will lead to a change in the pleasure, and continued contact will definitely lead to loss of pleasure. This, if you remember, we had discussed that these worldly contacts follow the law of diminishing returns. Okay, so when we contact the object for the first time, we say, let's say, x amount of pleasure, and as we indulge more and more in that particular contact, the quantum of pleasure is not the same as what we got the first time, x amount. It will always be x minus some amount. So x minus nx. And this keeps changing. The n will keep increasing. So, what we are taking out of that x becomes more and more. And all our addictions are actually examples of this. So, what has happened is that we are contacting an object, we derive a certain amount of pleasure from that contact, and then we become so dependent on that pleasure that we have to have that much amount of pleasure. That contact, we have to have that much amount of contact with the object to derive that pleasure. Typical examples are all addictions, smoking, drinking. So after some time, so maybe initially one cigarette a day gave you a great enough high. Over a period of time, it changed to 2 cigarettes a day. After some time, this has become to 10 cigarettes a pack, and so on and so forth. Same thing with drinking. We understand this with respect to the clearly addictive objects. But the same thing is with respect to the wealth we have, with respect to the power also. So all these things actually become an addiction with us. Some people have addiction for knowledge. So you want to keep on reading, the analysis. We keep on reading this one's version and that one's version. It's immaterial at the end of the day, because ultimately we have to develop our buddhi and our dhriti. So the continued contact also leads to loss of pleasure, and the contact itself is short lived and fleeting. So limited also in its during its duration. And once it's over, it leaves a lot of greed, anxiety, and if we are doing wrong things, guilt, and increases our actually addiction. And in Kat Upanishad, section 1, subsection 2, verse 6, Yam Raj is telling Nachiketa that a childlike person is deluded by lust for worldly riches and does not move on the correct path, the Shreya path. That is, the deep thoughts of the inner world do not arise in the person. The person does not want to attain that Paramatman through whose grace we are able to experience any experience actually. The person believes that this visible world, all our senses are outgoing, this visible world is the only world that exists. And because of this outward movement on the Priya path, he comes into my clutches again and again. Clutches, into my clutches is that of Yamraja's clutches. That means we continue into this cycle of birth and death. And of course, in chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, we have discussed extensively how sense contacts, sensual pleasures follow the law of diminishing returns. Yet, we know the theory we all understand, but left to ourselves, with all this knowledge that we possess, we tend to move out into the world, make worldly contacts. So, why does that happen within us? This happens because we are ignorant actually. We do not identify, we do not take support of that Paramatman within us, that completeness, that complete bliss which is within each one of us. So we are ignorant of that, or it's covered because of our vasanas, and therefore we feel a sense of void. See, when we are happy, we don't say that I can't have more happiness, I can always take more happiness, right? So there's no limit to how happy we can be, but sorrow, there's a particular limit to which we can tolerate, handle sorrow. After that we say, okay, no more, I cannot take it, right? So when we are going inwards, uh, we will become blissful, but the point is that we don't see it. It's something that we have to uh, open up, remove the layers of our personality, remove our vasanas, then we can go inside us, remove the clutter outside. But because we have not identified with that, we feel a sense of void. We're not completely blissful. In our ignorance, instead of moving on the Shreya path inwards, we start moving outwards, seeing the world. Okay, here is a sari, here is a better car, here is more money, more power. We move into the world, and this leads to us pitching our goals in the world instead of pitching it on the Brahman. So our thoughts start flowing towards a goal, which is an object. This is, of course, what we had discussed was desire. So instead of working on reaching our true nature, which is paripurna, whole, perfect, complete, absolute, infinite, we start moving into the world. It is only the jnani or the wise who realizes this maya and continues towards the journey within, makes the person God centered. And of course, either we become God centered, or each one of us is centered in some manner or the other. So someone wants more wealth, is power hungry. Some people like worries and problems. Some people are worried about the body. So, howsoever we are centered, so we direct our efforts, our thoughts, actions, and everything. And so, our entire assembly, the material assembly, our buddhi, our dhriti is directed towards the goal. And whatever we seek is what we get. So, when we are moving out into the world, the desires for the external world stem endlessly, and our goals of the external world, because of the variety that we see around us, is also infinite. But the pleasure that we seek from this goal is finite, is limited, is has a beginning and an end. So what is happening is that the worldly contacts consume us, our body, mind, and intellect. Our desires multiply, so does our stress and agitation. Therefore, the pleasures from the sense contacts are wombs of sorrow, as we have done in the earlier chapters, and are fleeting. This happiness, this sukh, which arises from the contact of a sense organs with the sense objects, is termed rajasic, passionate, thrilling mode of happiness, which is pleasurable in the initial stages but turns poisonous later on. Moving on to the last verse for the day, verse number 39. यतग्रे चानुबन्धे च सुखं मोहनमात्मनः निद्रालस्य प्रमादोस्थं ततामसमधु मुदारतम्. So the happiness which from the beginning to its sequel is delusive of the self, induced by sleep, indolence, and heedlessness, is called tamasic. So let's take this up word by word. Yet, that which, agre in the beginning, cha and anubandhe, bandhe, or in the end, when we end it in the sequel, cha and sukham, happiness, mohanam is delusive, atmanam, of that paramatman, that enabler within each one of us, nidra is sleep, alasya is indolence, laziness, pramad is heedlessness, Uttham is arising from. So, Nidra, Alasya, Pramad, Uttham becomes arising from sleep, indolence, and heedlessness. Tat, that, Tamasic, the Guna Tamasic, Udahiratam is said. So, the happiness which from the beginning to its end is delusive of the self, induced by sleep, indolence, and heedlessness, is called Tamasic. Let's chant it together. यदग्रे चानुबन्धे च सुखं मोहनमात्मनः निद्रालस्य प्रमादोस्थं तत् तामसमुदाहृतम्. So, tamasic sukh is the happiness that we experience when we are completely ignorant of that supreme reality. That delusion of Paramatman or not of non-existence of Paramatman continues from the beginning till the end. And this arises from our complete ignorance and or tamas. Ignorance and tamas I'm using as synonyms. And if you recollect, what are the words that we used for what were the symptoms of tamas in that chapter 14, the Gunatraya Vibhag Yog, verse number 13 had talked about, had said, Lord Krishna had said that dullness, inertia, heedlessness, and delusions are the qualities of a tamasic person. So, with that kind of an attitude, that is the kind of sukh that we will get. So, the words that we are using here are the same actually. Tamasic sukh is marked by nidra. Nidra is one is, of course, sleep, but here it has a deeper meaning. It means that non apprehension or non awareness of that supreme reality. So, the incapacity of the person to perceive life having a better goal, and they one functions at the base levels of sense gratification at the flesh level. Then we talk about alasya or slothfulness, laziness. This again, one is at the level of the body, it is inertia also of the intellect, that we don't want to apply ourselves to anything, we don't have the capacity to discriminate, and of course we lack effort. One is happy doing nothing at all. So that is slothful. And we feel that it's great. Today I've been lying in the bed from, you know, I got up late, I got up at 10 o'clock. What a time. So we derive happiness from that. I mean, all of us at times fall into this mode of a tamasic sukh also. So, and pramad is heedlessness. That means we are not worried about the consequences of one's actions. So when I get up at 11 o'clock, I'm not worried, okay, what is happening to the rest of the household? It's okay. They will take care of themselves, right? So that is the kind of an attitude. So the pleasure that we thus derive is called tamasic. And with that, we close our today's session.